Welcome, everyone. I can see those attendee numbers rising, and I'm so excited to have you all here. I'm going to give everyone just a moment to get connected to audio, etc. And I continue to see those numbers rise, so I'll sort of wait till there's a pause, till it seems like we have our critical mass that will be here. But welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm excited for today's presentation. All right, it has slowed our attendee number. So, and especially since our first few minutes are sort of introduction, I'll get started. I am going to check the chat really quickly. Yes, great. Thank you. In the chat, you'll all see that there is a message from Mariah Blake, our hostess with the mostest. If you are having any technical problems, or if you have any questions for me as I am going through this presentation, feel free to pop them in the chat. Or if you're having technical problems and the chat isn't working, feel free to email mblake@clinicians.org. That serves as a great reminder and segue. I will be checking the chat throughout, so feel free to engage, put anything in there, and questions, comments, etc. I'll be keeping an eye on it. All right, with that, we'll get into our content. Thank you all again so much for being here at Empowering Your Workforce, Considerations for Implementing and Responding to Staff Satisfaction Surveys. I'm Helen Ray Vernier, your presenter for today's session. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Senior Training Specialist at Association of Clinicians for the Underserved. So if you're here, hopefully you know a little bit about ACU, but just in case you don't, this is who we are, Association of Clinicians for the Underserved, or ACU. We were started over 25 years ago by alumni of the National Health Service Corps. And while we've changed a bit over the years, our focus really does remain the same: to improve the health of America's underserved populations and support the clinicians serving in those areas. And so to that end, the recruitment and retention of a transdisciplinary team is the road to achieving those goals. ACU has several different programs, including a vision services program, suicide safer care program for clinicians and patients, as well as others. And you can find out all about all the things that we do on our website, www.clinicians.org. But I am here today because of our BIPIC program, the STAR Center. So STAR in STAR Center stands for Solutions, Training, and Assistance for Recruitment and Retention. That's what that little exponential 2 is for the 2 R's there. And we're a program of ACU that's funded by a national cooperative agreement by the Bureau of Primary Healthcare, or BIPIC. And we're one of the now 22 National Training and Technical Assistance Partners, or NTAPs. And each of us focus on different niche areas relating to the health center program. And ours is clinical recruitment and retention. And the STAR Center started almost 10 years ago now. We're coming up on 10 years. And since then, we've been producing free resources, training and technical assistance on all things workforce, recruitment, and retention. And the STAR Center website is chcworkforce.org, and we encourage all of you to go to the website at your leisure and check it out. Check out all the resources we have there. And just as a note, we do have them as 2 separate websites, even though we are a program of ACU, because we want you to know that when you're on the STAR Center website, everything has been designed for folks within the health center movement, health centers, primary care associations, HCCNs, lookalikes, and other folks within this health center program world, and they're all completely free to you, as HRSA has already paid for them. So with that, I don't see anything new in the chat, so we'll get into some of our protein of our conversation. So our agenda for today is that we're going to talk about staff satisfaction surveys, obviously quite shocking, I know, but we're going to go over just sort of an introduction. Then we're going to talk about some considerations for implementing staff satisfaction surveys, and then we're going to focus on responding to staff satisfaction surveys, and what that can look like. But before we get to that, I want to know a little bit about y'all. So you can either go to menti.com and enter 65187316, or you can hold up your phone to that QR code and put it right in there. It'll take you, if you have your camera app open, it'll take you to this. I'm going to give everyone just a few more moments to get on to that page. And then I have a few questions. Again, I just want to know a little bit more about all of you. So I'll give you just one more second. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this guy and go to our Mentimeter. Okay, so our first question is, have you conducted a staff satisfaction survey in the past? So far, I know there's way more than 25 of you on here, so it'll continue to grow, but it does seem like a majority of you at this point have conducted one in the past. So that's good to know, but of course, also happy to have folks who haven't. I think we'll all learn something from this. Give folks a few more minutes to respond to that. And I see we have a few new participants. So if you're just joining, you can go to menti.com and enter 65187316. And you can answer this question. But yes, it looks like about 3/4 of folks have conducted a staff satisfaction survey in the past. So with that in mind, go to our next one. So my next question is just for those of you who answered yes. So again, about 3/4 of you, if you answered yes to the previous question, what has the frequency been? So do you do them when the mood hits, annually, every other year? You don't know, that's okay. Every 3 years, etc. Again, it's looking like majority of folks do them annually, but there is some diversity and variety in there as well of when we're conducting these. But still maybe like 2/3 in the annual, although it's being edged out by sporadically. Oh, yes. This is maybe just because I'm a millennial, but I can't help but think of Clueless when I see the word sporadically. So RIP Brittany Murphy, and feel free to share an emoji in the chat if that means anything to you. And if not, go watch Clueless. It's a fantastic movie. All right, great. That's good to know. So again, still majority are annually, with the next being sporadically, and then we've got some who are unsure and some who are every other year. Good to know. Okay, and so then again, if you have already conducted one in the past, what was participation like in terms of how many folks participated? Did you get a lot of participation? Was it like pulling teeth? Wow. Oh, for a minute there, it was just 4s all across the board. Okay, 51 to 75 is looking like a leader so far. But again, I'll give everyone another moment or so. Yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, looks like again 51 to 75% is seems like the winner there. Also, I will say 51 to 75 is a great goal. 75% is like you're doing great, is what folks say. So great job for those of you in that zone. And I really totally understand it's definitely a really hard thing to do. And then for folks in that 75 to 100, maybe drop some tips in the chat. How are you getting those numbers? Great job. Maybe tell us how you're doing it. Okay. And then I believe this is my last question for you now. I will have others later. But if you have conducted a staff satisfaction survey in the past, what changes did you make in response to the results? Is there anything that stands out that you got feedback on that then you were really able to make a change in your organization? Did you implement new time off policy? Did you create pay transparency? Did you created a new onboarding program, IT improvements, new training programs, more involved leadership communication, enhanced benefits? Amazing. Those all sound great. Enhanced safety initiatives, established a corporate culture committee. Love that. Flexible hybrid shifts, better health improvement technology improvements. Implementing poll surveys, great. Added another paid holiday, that's fantastic. Communicated misconceptions, that's great. And changed some benefit structure options. These are all fantastic things. So yeah, these are just some examples of what we get out of these and the things that we can create and change. More paid holidays, more trainings, wellness materials, culture committee. Great. All right, fantastic. Thank you all so much for answering. And I'm going to go away from this page, but feel free to put more in the chat if they come up. Oh, I've got some that I missed. Changed PTO, added paid holidays, implemented manager level engagement improvement plans. Additionally, we worked aggressively on better communication / transparency from senior management and performed numerous market adjustments. Amazing. Yes. These are all fantastic. I'm so excited to hear about all these. And for those of you who haven't done one yet, and you're going to walk out of this being like, yes, I'm ready, I can do it. Here are some of the things you can learn. Changed onboarding process. Great. Okay, let's just make sure. I'm pretty sure that's my last one for you now. Okay, yes, that's my last one for you now. Thank you all so much for participating in that. I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. There we go. Okay, and I would also like to be able to see the PowerPoint. Great. Okay, thank you all so much for participating. Again, I think that helps me know our audience, and also for your peers in the room, you can see some of the things that come up, and we can sort of, maybe hear from some of those experts within the room on what they have been able to implement and what that has looked like. So thank you all so much for sharing. So just for as we want to lay the groundwork and make sure that everyone is, we're all on the same page. Basically, staff satisfaction is a measure of workers' contentedness with their job, whether they like their job or individual aspects or facets of their job, such as the nature of their work or their supervision. And job satisfaction can be measured in cognitive, affective, and behavioral components. And it's important to think about too why we're focusing on this, and hopefully y'all are already we're all already on the same page in terms of this, but if you're ever needing to communicate like why we need to be focusing on workforce, at the Star Center, we really do believe that workforce is the fuel for your health center organizational efforts. And quite simply, if we didn't have our health center workforce, health centers wouldn't be able to see the patients they're funded to serve and do what they're designed to do. So by having a full fuel tank of workforce, a health center identifies workforce as an essential organizational issue, invests in appropriate operational and staffing resources, and really puts this at the forefront of their strategic planning. So like I said, staff satisfaction is just how content or satisfied employees are with their job. That's quite simply all it is. And employee satisfaction is typically measured using an employee satisfaction survey, and factors that influence employee satisfaction that are addressed in these surveys might include compensation, workload, perceptions of management, flexibility, teamwork, resources, and other things. And these are all important to organizations who want to keep their employees happy and then reduce turnover. So a simple definition of a employee satisfaction or staff satisfaction survey is an employee feedback tool that allows employers to find out about the employee experience directly from those employees themselves. It is important to, think about our rhetoric and just like the semantics of it all and what language we're using. So I think often out there we hear all these different words being used: staff satisfaction, employee engagement, and they're similar concepts, staff satisfaction and employee engagement. On the surface, they're definitely similar concepts, and many people use these terms interchangeably. The importance, though, of knowing the difference between satisfaction and engagement is critical for an organization to make those strategic decisions and create a culture of engagement. And so employee satisfaction covers the basic concerns and needs of the employees. Both concepts are important, and staff satisfaction surveys can be designed to collect information about both. So like I said, kind of at the beginning, this is semantics, but at its core, and what's most important is asking the right questions and measuring the right factors with benchmarked results. So through this, your organization can construct a strategic plan to improve employee engagement and in turn performance. So again, I'm just pointing out that there is this difference in semantics, but that depending on the language you're using, things might be interpreted differently. And more, it's a way for folks who are doing the organizing of these surveys to just think through, what questions do you really want to be asking? What are you hoping to get out of this? And what's going to give you the information that you're really hoping for and looking for? So the process is for conducting a staff satisfaction survey. This is a baseline, basic way of thinking through what that process looks like. But this is also the order that we'll discuss the elements in as well. So the process is to collect, analyze, communicate, and act. And I'm going to go through each of those sections as we move through this presentation. Again, though, quickly, as we always try to give you resources so that you, as folks who are interested in workforce and as folks who want to be conducting these types of interventions and information gathering elements, we want to make sure that you have the tools to communicate to other decision makers why these things are important. So why conduct a staff satisfaction survey? Why are we doing this? A carefully designed and conducted employee survey can really reveal a lot of information about employee perceptions that management can then use to improve the workplace. And organization responsiveness to employee feedback leads to higher retention rates, lower absenteeism, improved productivity, better customer service, and higher employee morale. And the simple fact that the organization is conducting a survey can send a positive message to employees that their opinions are valued. And then in addition, managers can really gain insights into issues affecting their departments that allow them to manage more effectively. Conversely, though, it is important to think about this. If the senior management team is not fully committed and ready to really listen to, and most importantly, act on what employees are saying, then conducting a survey can falsely raise expectations among employees and then that can lead to an employee relations disaster. So it is important to make sure that if you're going to conduct an employee satisfaction survey or engagement survey, that you're ready to communicate the results and make changes and act on maybe not everything. You don't have to make these huge sweeping changes all at once, but you have to at least be willing to engage with the material and the feedback and make some changes, or it can actually be worse than if you never conducted the survey in the first place. I have something in the chat, so I'm going to check it. Preach it. Yes, I will. So again, in terms of just offering those like reasons of like, why are we doing this? And I think everyone in this room probably already knows this, but why does this matter? Why do we engage in these workforce strategies and programs? Turnover is expensive. And so again, part of what we want to do at the Star Center is make sure that you leave any training you have with us with resources and action items and to-dos. So we just want to highlight this financial assessment tool that can help you calculate your health center's turnover costs, and it can help you answer these questions that are listed on the screen of what is the actual cost of turnover, what's the cost of a provider vacancy, how much does it cost to recruit, how much money is your organization losing to these workforce issues, and how can you better invest your money to retain staff and minimize losses. So as we go through and you're thinking about, how am I going to convince someone to do another annual survey, like, we're trying to reduce turnover because turnover is expensive, among other things. And then again, a sort of final piece of why we conduct these surveys, we love this quote at the Star Center: without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And that can make it so that, we just want to be backing up everything we're doing with actual data, so that when we say like, hey, we need to rearrange our PTO or, create a culture committee, we're backing that up with data that came from within our organization. And then just quickly do think about how you're presenting your data. Data storytelling is a really important skill, and we want to make sure that we're not biasing our data, but that we're taking it and showing it with a narrative that people can take in and interpret, and from their action can come. So we just want to be thoughtful about that. Something else in the chat. Great. I'll take it. I'll take all these accolades. Thanks. Okay, so here are some considerations for implementing staff satisfaction surveys. So as we begin on this section, it's important to note that just 1 in 5 HR and engagement leaders agreed that their employees deeply trust their company leaders, and only 22% say their organization is effective at fostering a culture that supports clear feedback. And many managers forget that each person has unique engagement needs and should be consulted when developing strategies for tackling complex issues in the workplace. So as we're thinking about that folks aren't feeling like they trust their leaders and aren't feeling heard, how can we start to approach these subjects and become trustable? That's not just how can we, become trusted, but how do we earn trust? And so thinking about how we receive feedback, it can be really important. It can be really important to do that. And of course, I think in the nonprofit field specifically, and within the health center movement, there's a little special place in many of our hearts for Brene Brown. But Brene Brown said, "There's no mastery without feedback." So I like to hold that quote up whenever I'm receiving feedback, to help me remember to keep an open mindset. We want to regard all data as information to guide our decisions, not as judgment on your leadership or value. Make sure that we can remain in a creative versus reactive space of consideration with employee feedback. So like one strongly worded comment should not shift your entire strategy. Look for the opportunities to gain insight. And some of the benefits of receiving feedback well are that your relationships become richer, you learn and get better at things. Other people find it more enjoyable to work around you. It's easier for you to work with others to solve problems. And by your example, you help others see the value in seeking feedback for themselves. So as we're starting to, ask for this feedback, we should make sure that we're presenting that we are genuinely open to it and that we're showing people that we're open to it. I won't read through this whole thing, but just as if you're looking back at these slides later, I want this to be a resource for you. So thinking about how we're cultivating a growth mindset and identity, again, as we're collecting these responses, and then we're going to read them. So making sure that we're giving up simple labels, we're shifting to a growth mindset, we're moving towards a growth identity, we're encouraging people to discuss our blind spots with us, we're shifting from blame conversations to joint contribution conversations, and we're holding people accountable. Okay, so here we are at our first step, collection. So all the data is going in there. So some considerations for your staff satisfaction surveys are some are listed here, and we're going to go through some of them. So there are various things to take into consideration as you begin to plan. We want to offer, content, time, and space to delve into these areas. But for now, this is, we'll just go over some of these quickly. But so you want to think about the type of survey. So you'll want to consider what type of survey makes the most sense for your organization. The 3 most common types of employee surveys include employee opinion and satisfaction surveys, employee culture surveys, and employee engagement surveys. And again, that just sort of is more about the kinds of questions you're asking and what you want to be learning. You want to think about the timing and frequency of your employee surveys. So organizations should conduct surveys of employees on a regular basis. Most companies elect to ask their employees for feedback annually, as is supported by our own Mentimeter results. Requesting regular feedback really does show employees that the organization actually cares about how they perceive their work environment. But choosing when to conduct the survey takes careful consideration. So be thoughtful about that. The survey design. So prior to administering a new employee survey, employers should spend some time looking at previous surveys and their results, if you have those, and ask questions like, what's the driving force behind the survey? So like, why are we doing this? Is it simply because it's time for another survey? Is the survey tied to our business or organizational strategies? And many companies find it useful to form a multi-level cross-functional team to consider the organization's key objective for conducting a survey before designing it. And then think about your policy issues. Most organizations don't see a need to develop policies around the conduct of periodic surveys of employees, but the employer's internal policies and practices, as well as any labor contracts, should be consistent with existing policies, rules, or labor practices. So this is something to consider if your health center has a union. It's like, do you need to be in contact with the union before you conduct a survey of this kind, things like that. And then thinking about legal issues. For employers, the greatest potential legal concern is that their third-party survey provider, if that's what they use, might have infringed on the copyright of the original survey author, or they're called pirate surveys, which are less cool than they sound. Pirate surveys are bad. Or counterfeit surveys. So organizations should look for registered copyright and the date of the registration in the survey materials under evaluation and ask for copyright registration. Again, this is all if you're using a third party and not just designing and conducting it in-house. And again, like I mentioned in the last one, if the organization has unionized employees, the employer must provide appropriate notifications and advanced discussions to ensure agreement to include union employees in the survey. So do be thoughtful about that. And then we also need to be considering employee communication. So employers must prepare supervisors and managers with advanced information about the rationale for conducting the employee survey, expectations on the timeline, and expectations on the timeliness of communicating results, plans to follow up on results, and questions that employees may ask. And again, for unionized environments, it's a good idea to also brief the union reps and stewards on the process and timing of the survey. I have something in the chat. Yeah, so we have a question in the chat about that most people are unwilling to participate in surveys for fear of reprisal. Do you think anonymous is better? So I think it does depend on your organization, but if that's something you've heard, I absolutely think that anonymous is better. And actually, I'm going to walk this back. In general, I think anonymous is better. The way that I've seen it done that is like slightly less anonymous is like by department, so that if there's feedback about a manager, you can know like what manager. But then that gets sticky and complicated in terms of like, what if it's a department of 3 people, and then anonymity becomes harder. But yeah, and then there, again, a comment around, I've also had employees share concerns on privacy, even with anonymous feedback. And I think that's fair. Of course, like we are known within our organizations if we say certain things, even if we don't, we might worry that someone could say, oh, this is definitely that person. I still think that trying to find ways to, again, become trustable, where we can say like, okay, we're anonymizing it in terms of how you do it. And then we are going beyond that to any like written feedback we get in the comments. We're going to run it through ChatGPT to make it have a totally different writing style or whatever. And then we're using AI and we're feeling cool and, modern, but we're also showing that we're going to make sure that, like, yes, maybe one person will know, maybe HR will know, but how do we work to become trustable people within the organization that can say like, and I'm going to make sure that as we disseminate this information more widely, both to managers who are making decisions about how your career is going to go, and to other staff, that these will be anonymized in these different ways. Or even, if we're pulling out comments, we can find trends within the comments without, that's a good point, Ed, that we can pull out the trends and say like, this many people commented on blah, 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 without sharing those specific comments, which again could make someone feel like maybe their privacy won't be out there. And then Ed shared, don't run it through AI. That actually puts it out into the public space and can run afoul of privacy policies. That is very fair and true. And Alex shared that if it doesn't have to be either or, you can do an org-wide anonymous survey with optional focus on group sessions where people can attend and give feedback to help the org. Very true. And I will share more about that on my next slide. So quickly, to just finish up with these last 4 bits: technology Most organizations use electronic surveys because they're more efficient and faster, and they use fewer resources, and the ability to complete the survey via a mobile device like a phone or tablet may also enhance that experience, and then also can add to the anonymity. And then in terms of interpreting the results, survey results should not be taken at face value, kind of as I was discussing before, even those on the positive end of the spectrum, regardless of whether you're working with a third-party vendor or tabulating the results in-house. You'll need to assess the reliability of the data. And employers also need to determine the format in which you wish to display the results. And then survey follow-up. Organizations often establish cross-functional teams to respond and act to those survey findings, and a majority of the team should consist of non-senior employees. However, each team does need to be supported by a senior level champion whose responsibility is to monitor and support, but not manage the team. And then beyond the surveys, in addition to the information that can be generated as a result of an employee survey, some organizations also choose to initiate strategic conversations with some employees, like Alex mentioned, or to explore those key issues more in depth. And the hidden power of these conversations really does lie in the fact that they're not about data, but they are about dialogue, or they're about a different kind of data, that qualitative data. And they tend to make employees feel really valued. And all employees need to understand that their employers will treat their opinions with dignity and respect. And part of that, they need to understand this, is that needs to be true. We need to make sure that we are treating opinions with dignity and respect. So in terms of conducting, thinking about how we are doing them as well. So there's different options. We can do annual pulse and check-ins. I will say that, again, we recommend annual, but annuals maybe not enough. Most people say survey fatigue is a reason for limiting their surveys to once a year, but employees are actually exhausted from giving feedback and seeing little to no action in response. And so by the time leadership visibly takes action on an annual survey, it's almost time for the next annual survey, and the previous year's feedback is likely irrelevant. So the good news is that organizations are starting to pay more attention, and 89% of organizations utilized annual surveys earlier in the decade, but just 30% are using other employee monitoring events. And these numbers drastically changed over the last several years. So now only 63% of organizations publish an annual survey, and 80% of companies used other employee monitoring data. I'm not sure I said that right, but basically like 10 years ago, we were at more like just every year, let's do it, with 30% doing other things. And now we're at 63 doing it annually, and 80% of folks are having these other methods of checking in. And so this means that more organizations and employees are reaping the benefits of a culture of continuous listening, and that your organization should get on board. So for example, you can regularly take pulse of surveys or the pulse of employee engagement to determine how well managers are meeting their needs and communicating the results in a manner that urges prompt action. And engagement is fluid and continual, and check-ins are required to catch those important quick changes. So by leveraging pulse surveys, organizations are able to regularly identify both how employees feel about their work and the why behind their feelings. And then check-ins let employees provide real-time feedback on day-to-day issues that are coming up that kind of require immediate attention. So I know this is kind of saying like, you thought you were coming to learn how to do one thing annually, and actually I'm telling you, you have to do 3 things. But I am, sorry. Basically, we're suggesting that you do annual surveys, and that can help you compare data across the years, but then that you're also doing your pulse check-ins to allow for that continuous improvement. And these can be much shorter. They can be 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And then that you're having these check-ins where it's more personal conversations. And then as a thing is coming up, someone doesn't have to wait 9 months to say, hey, back in September, I was really affected by blah, blah, blah. You can fix problems as they're coming up instead of, maybe losing someone before it's the next time for that survey. So Now we're going to think about responding directly or responding to staff satisfaction surveys. So responding directly to your employees' feedback is a key driver of engagement. In fact, 90% of workers say that they're more likely to stay at an employer that takes and acts on feedback. And that second part is critical, as soliciting feedback, but then failing to act on it is, like we already talked about, extremely disempowering. So follow through is of utmost importance and really does need to be timely. Don't waste months arduously identifying a list of a dozen areas for improvement and fleshing out strategy for addressing them. If you wait too long and employees aren't aware of your process, they'll assume that nothing is being done and they'll feel like it was a waste of their time. So instead, develop those micro actions that will result in incremental change so employees can see the results faster. So like I said, this is the process, and here we're at the analyze piece. So I've already said it, but I'll say it again. The importance of responding to your employee engagement survey results cannot be understated. Salesforce research found that among workers who felt their voice was heard, 73% say that they were empowered to perform their best work, but only 34% of organizations believe that their employees actively provide feedback to the organization and leaders, likely because they're not giving their employees the feedback tools that they want. So there's a massive gap between the listening opportunities that HR and engagement leaders believe their employees crave and on the actually acting on the feedback. And so folks are saying that they want to be engaged and be listened to more, but then are getting this once a year thing. And so their struggles and challenges aren't being addressed. And so businesses and organizations must, like I've already said, really need to continuously collect that feedback in a way that is comprehensive, but not disruptive. So we've already discussed the collection process, but so we want to be thinking about our analyzing process. Let me check the chat. And yes, the slides will be shared via email, and then they'll also be posted to our website. Okay, so think about, like we've already talked about in terms of like, how am I going to be a person who can accept feedback? When you're getting your results, think about grounding yourself, taking a moment to do, some deep breaths or some grounding stuff, and not basing your worth on the survey results before you go into the analysis section. And of course, you're probably going to get great results as well. You're going to get positive feedback, negative feedback, and everything in between. But I do think that this is one of the ways that we can, make sure that we are responding in ways that really make sense, is to make sure that we are ready to receive that feedback. And then when analyzing your data, ask important questions. So are any results particularly surprising? Which of them require immediate action and which are less pressing? And these are the types of questions that can help guide you on how to properly respond to those employee engagement survey results. So start with reading comments and using analytics dashboards to get a quick overview on survey results, and then you can dive deeper into each data set for additional insight. And so you should generally prioritize issues by their potential impact on your team and your organization. For example, if the data shows that employees aren't feeling appreciated, you should encourage employees to participate in your recognition program if you have one, or build promotional campaigns to nip this trend in the bud. Or if you find that employees aren't buying into your culture and company values, it's time to take action before your organization faces the consequences of a poor work environment. And after the most pressing issues are resolved, then you can move on to other types of improvement. But make sure that whatever the issue is that you're working on, you're looping in relevant stakeholders early on. So interpreting the results of employee engagement surveys is the first step towards making them count, and managers need to take the lead. So managers are in the best position to take action on feedback. So having them review survey results relevant for their team and giving them the tools they need to do so is critical. HR should play an important supporting role, guiding and empowering managers on how to leverage the survey tools and resources provided, but the managers are the ones who are going to be able to make these everyday changes. So it's also important to think about what types of what different types of data show you. So you've got comments that represent key qualitative information that can give you important insights into the why behind the responses. And you can sort through dozens of comments, and that can be difficult. So you can look for a platform that gives you the option to to sort them by category, like enthusiasm or recognition or areas of improvement. But once you do that, comments are extremely valuable, and this type of qualitative data will help you assess engagement levels and gather any potential recommendations. And then you can look at engagement scores. It's a single metric that really gives you an at-a-glance indication of how engaged your employees are. And you should be able to easily access this metric per question for your direct reports if you're a manager looking at this, or for the organization as a whole. And finding a platform that lets you display trends and engagement scores over time is an excellent way to see how your engagement initiatives are progressing. And then think about your response rate. I asked you about that. Seems like a lot of folks are having really good response rates, so that's wonderful. But so this goes back to some of the questions we've seen in the chat about it's an indicator of how comfortable and willing your employees are to provide honest feedback. And so if you're getting a low response rate, it may mean that your employees are disengaged or that your organization lacks an environment of psychological safety. And that in and of itself is data that you can use to address that potential problem. So you should aim for a response rate, like industry standard is 80 to 90%. That if your organization has less than 50 employees, but 70 to 80% if your organization has a few hundred, and then 65 to 80 if you employ 1,000 or more people. So it kind of depends on how many employees you have, should really change what your goal is around that. And then heat maps are a grid showing metrics across question categories, so you can easily identify the problem areas within your organization or team. And then they provide visual cues to highlight information. So like where a score sits in comparison to relevant benchmarks. And visually identifying hotspots is a great place to start, and you'll get further insights on which issues you should prioritize, as we kind of talked about in the last one. So then some other pieces that are themselves data, or that are ways for you to look at data, are the spread of responses. So when you're digging into responses to specific questions, you need an easy way to see the spread of negative and positive answers. And so this is a way that you can visualize that. Benchmarks, you can either benchmark yourself against other departments or teams or organizations if possible. And then you can benchmark your team against the organization as a whole as well. And so that can be helpful to think about, where we are versus another person on the team, et cetera. And if you're a leader, if you're doing really well, then that can show you that like you can be a good resource for your peers as well. And then dashboards can be really useful. Managers will greatly benefit from an intuitive dashboard that provides them with data on key metrics in a single place and lets them easily navigate to do more analytics tools and detailed reports. So this can be a really helpful thing, and they can be customized to suit each departmental need, et cetera. And then you can look at additional drivers of engagement. Your survey should also focus on other important drivers of engagement, including satisfaction, alignment, future orientation, well-being, support, and recognition. And if you see poor engagement scores and negative comments or questions related to long-term fit at your company or your organization, it's time to take a serious look at professional development initiatives, for example. That's one thing that that might come out of this. So then the next piece of our process is communicating. And the way you communicate employee engagement results, survey results, depends on your audience. So for a company-wide survey, you should share relevant information with all employees before proceeding to those individual team meetings. The CEO or ED should hold a company-wide meeting to cover the top areas of focus and discuss how the company will act on the survey results. And then the executives and managers can meet with their teams separately to take that deeper dive and create collaborative action plans. And so by revealing results to everyone, you can emphasize broader opportunities to make the company an even better place to work. And then for a smaller scale survey, it's a good idea to share results with only those employees and teams that participated. So in either case, we definitely don't want to wait too long before sharing your results with the team. And it's important to just remember that every day you wait is another day the feedback becomes less relevant. So to maintain the anonymity of respondents, whenever possible, reference averaged results, that getting to that question we had before as well. And Note that many people are visual learners, so sharing the outcomes of the survey is best done with a presentation, and your deck should include charts and graphs, especially comparison charts that reveal different changes from previous surveys, again, to show that you are paying attention and making these changes. And you don't feel the need to comment on or touch on every comment or piece of data in the survey. That people will get bored, but be strategic in identifying a limited number of really relevant hotspots with the goal of developing those action plans around them with your team. And whatever you do, don't try to spin the data. It will be obvious to your employees, and it devalues their feedback, and it will weaken that trust that we're working on building. So during the presentation, welcome commentary, give your employees a voice, and that can give you more context as well. So now we're going to quickly talk about building and implementing action plans, as this is the next part of the process of acting. Let me quickly check the chat. So the question is around a good technology tool or guide to organize the data. This, I think, really does depend on the organization, the size. A lot of SurveyMonkey tools are free, so I really highly recommend SurveyMonkey. But yes, you can use Excel, you can use Google Forms. There are tons of different options out there. And yeah, I would say it just kind of depends on your organization and your needs. For folks who have done them in the past, feel free to pop in the chat some tools or technology that you have used that have been really successful. And conversely, if there's something that you're like, I use this, it was terrible, nobody do this again. So action planning, it's just an approach rather than a specific method. And it just helps focus ideas, and it helps decide what steps you need to take to achieve particular goals. It's a statement of what you want to achieve over a given period of time, and preparing an action plan is just a good way to help reach objectives. And an effective action plan should give a definite timetable and set of clearly defined steps. And then for each objective, there should be a separate action plan. So the process of action planning is to define your problems, collect and analyze the data, clarify and prioritize the problems, write a goal statement for each solution, and make sure that they're smart, that they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. And then implement those solutions. That is your actual action plan. Monitor and evaluate the results as they come through, and then restart with a new problem, or if you didn't make the progress you wanted to, refine the old problem. So that's the process we're working with. And that's a lot about what action planning is, but an action plan is just a documented strategy for solving a problem. And an action plan can also be known as a statement of work or a study plan. And at the very basic, the action plan is the documentation of what tasks will be done by whom and when. And the action plan helps you manage the project and maintain focus on the goal. And an action plan should include areas for your gaps and barriers, your opportunities, your strategies for improvement, and your timeline. So as you build a collaborative action plan, the ultimate goal should be to empower employees to take ownership in responding to feedback and their own engagement. Managers that fail to involve their employees and fellow leaders when establishing an action plan do experience lower engagement rates overall. So provide a safe space where employees feel comfortable contributing to the conversation, inspire those managers to get to know their employees on a personal level, and motivate them to recognize those who are speaking up. And then by encouraging employee participation when developing a collaborative action plan, managers really do create a culture of feedback based on trust. So the way you are acting on the survey results can also be part of how you are even responding to it. That you are including employees as you create this can be really important. So make sure that we're setting aside time to speak to our different team members, get input on those overall results, make sure that we're having these open conversations, and create an environment where folks feel empowered. And identifying ways to quickly respond to feedback or micro actions can be a really critical way to do this. Change happens incrementally, so don't try to build Rome in a day. Instead, work with your team to find at least a few tangible actions that you can take that address the problem areas that you've identified, and then immediately begin to implement those. And then employees will appreciate seeing their feedback taken seriously and will do everything they can to help that change happen. We also want to be really clear about communicating our actions. Transparency is one of our overarching goals of an employee engagement survey. And employees are far more likely to be engaged with their work and the organization if they feel like they understand the motives behind the decisions being made, and just as importantly, have a voice in the process. So people don't want to be left in the dark. So make sure that we're being thoughtful about, yes, engaging folks in those action planning meetings, but also communicating really clearly where we are in the process, what's happening, and what our next steps are, and even how we chose these as the first things to take action on, etc. And then make sure that as we're putting our action plans into practice, we're reliably following through on the timing for quarterly and annual survey questions, or those pulse surveys if we're doing them at a different cadence. Continue to ensure that employees feel safe, giving honest answers by maintaining confidentiality and humble curiosity regarding critical feedback. Look at your trends over time. Again, separate from those specific comments and instead look at our trends to guide our organizational priorities and needs. Avoid reactive decisions based on limited information or point in time frustrations that may not be representative of the larger staff group's needs. So again, if we're doing check-ins and we hear that one person is struggling with something, we can address that for that one person without putting a ton of energy into something that might not actually be such a big thing for them. Okay, so in the last few moments, I have another question for you, and it's about the HRSA Health Center Workforce Wellbeing Survey. So if you kept your Mentimeter up, you can just pull it back up, or if you don't have it up, you can return to menti.com and do 65187316. So I just have, I think, 1 or 2 questions on this. I'll give everyone just one more moment, and then we'll go back to that question. Okay, let's share. Okay, so my first question is, did your organization participate in this? The Health Center Workforce Wellbeing Survey that was put out by HRSA through JSI or John Snow Inc. Looks like the majority are saying yes. That's good to know. So partly I just want to take a few minutes here at the end to think about some of the ways that we could utilize that data, since if we already engaged with that as an organization, maybe we didn't also do another survey last year. But so it looks like most people are yes, with a few no's in there as well. And then did you, since it was, an organization could, but also individuals were asked to, did you personally participate in the survey? While you answer that, I'm going to take a sip of lemonade. Okay, again, it's looking like the majority are yes. Okay, yeah, 81% yes. Okay, that's my final question for you all. So we'll quickly go back to this guy. And then we have a question, has there been any word on when those results will be shared? I'm gonna just show you something right now. So basically, in case you didn't already know, between November 2022 and January 2023, HRSA fielded a survey that measured workforce well-being, job satisfaction, and burnout at health centers. Nearly 50% of approximately 1,500 HRSA-supported health centers participated. So we have even more than the average, so great. And participating staff represent diverse workforce categories. The results will provide baseline information about the health center workforce. So the results were supposed to be delivered in spring 2023. Here we are approaching fall 2023. So as our dear friend Jim would say, soon shortly is the answer to your question that was placed in the chat. So as soon as they can, basically, Each person, or HRSA will give this information where each participating health center will receive access to a dashboard, and the dashboard is for the health center to use for its own quality improvement, and it will include averages of the responses for that health center. It will not include a list of survey respondents. It will not include individual responses, and the dashboard will summarize the health center's initial results. And it may include comparisons to larger groups of respondents. For example, 35% of health center X's staff are experiencing burnout, blah, 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 or these ones listed here. So yeah. Also, after that, HRSA will share state, regional, and national dashboards with technical assistance partners like us and like your PCA. And these will analyze data by job categories, but we won't have the same level that you have. And I love a good animation, so I made those bold reveal because why not? So I know that's not a very satisfying answer. I'm not the most satisfied with that answer either, but soon, shortly. And I do believe, I really believe that it's coming up soon. So I know I talked a lot, and also we engaged throughout, so I really appreciate that. But do you all have any questions in these last few minutes about anything we covered? I think a lot of great questions were asked throughout, but I'm happy to see if there are others that come in. And while you type those into the chat, Mariah will be putting in a evaluation link, and we'd really love for you to, or not, it's not a link, sorry, it just comes up through Zoom. I should know how that works. So Linda, to your point, yes, you will receive the recording of the session and the slides via email, and then they will also be posted to our website. It sometimes takes a couple days for the video to render, etc., but as a registrant and attendee, you will get them straight to your inbox. And then they will also be available. But yes, if folks could fill out the evaluation survey, that would be wonderful. We really appreciate your responses. It helps us do a better job serving you. And of course, our funders like it. You can always access us via these ways. And yeah, feel free to reach out. The info at chcworkforce.org goes to a real person. Michelle, she's not here right now because she's doing another training, but it goes to a real person, and we'll be happy to respond. Stephanie, thank you so much. And yep, love that you attended our learning collaborative as well. I'm excited that your current survey closes tomorrow. Best of luck as you analyze that data. We love to hear how it goes. And yeah, thank you all so much for coming and participating. This is a list. Again, you'll get these slides, but we have tons of resources available. We're constantly putting out new stuff. So we have a bunch of things that are available if you're working on, I know I saw in the Mentimeter, a lot of folks were talking about changing their onboarding processes. We have an onboarding checklist. If you're thinking about creating career ladders or staff development things, we have an HPET financial impact assessment tool. We have tons of great stuff. And then we also have some self-paced courses and podcasts we encourage you to engage with. It is right almost at the top of the hour, so I will say thank you again for attending. If you haven't finished filling out the survey, please do. We love that feedback, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you all today. Thank you so much for spending what I assume is your afternoon with me.